There was one guy that always made it through the pileup on the first call, no matter what, and that was KR2Q, and he runs QRP. He runs 5 watts. Every single time he would call in the clear, one call, off frequency, every time, single time, because he didn't zero bait everybody and he waited just a heartbeat to throw his call in there. If everybody did that, it would make life so much easier.
Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. I'm back with the contest crew, Randy K5ZD and Chris KL9A. Prior to turning the cameras on, Randy was talking about over the past 7 days, he's made over 6,000 QSOs, and it just led us into a conversation about how operators could be more competitive via their operating skills and also maybe some hardware advice. Randy and Chris, thank you for joining me.
Hey, great to be here.
So Randy, why don't you explain what you were doing for the past 7 days? Because you weren't just randomly on making 6,000 QSOs in your spare time.
There's an event going on in the month of January called the Worldwide Award. It's sponsored by hamaward.cloud. These are the guys who did the real-time QSO streaming and scoreboarding for WRTC in Italy. And they've gone on to sponsor multiple ones of these events. And it's like a month-long scavenger hunt. There's a number of stations that are indicated as activators, so they're special event stations, and then everyone else is chasing them. And as the activators work people, all the QSOs are streaming up to the Ham Award server, and then you can see how many people everyone's worked. And as we all know, with DXers and contesters, anytime you count stuff, people are going to collect things and want to see their score go up the scoreboard. They have a lot of different stations. I think there's 73 different activator stations this time, and I'm leading a team that's using the call N1W, November 1 Whiskey. And so everybody's operating from their own station. You can only have one station on a band mode at a time. And what's great is when you have a lot of people chasing, one of the rules in the thing is that you can work each activator station once per day on each band mode. So this means the pileups just keep getting bigger and bigger as we go through the month, as more guys get drawn into the activity. So it's pretty awesome to get on in the mornings or in the evenings and when the band's open to Europe and just have these screaming pileups on both phone and CW. What brought the topic of the day up was I was just thinking as I'm running people, there's a lot of things people could do to be more effective. There's certain guys who always just seem to be able to get through the pileup right away. And there's other guys that just seems to take a long time for them. I can hear them calling, but I can't ever figure out what their call is. And then finally we work down to where we can get them. There is definitely a difference between DXers and contesters. Contesters tend to be very focused on being very brief, like send your call sign once, send the information one time, and you're done. DXers seem to be a little bit different. They send their calls more times, often because they're calling these big pileups. They tend to send the signal report twice, even if it's 5NN. They always seem to like to send 73 in TU. So it's just really hard to get super high rate. But what I love is when you do the over and there's 45 guys calling you, just how you unwind them. Probably the biggest problem that I notice is how many people call zero beat. So you get spotted by the RBN or you put out a spot or somebody else spots you. And it just seems like inevitably there's a whole bunch of people just right on the same frequency. They're very loud. You should be able to copy them no problem. And when only one of them is sending at a time, it's a piece of cake. But because they're all calling on exactly the same frequency, you just hear this modulated tone and you can't get anything. And if you throw a little polar flutter in there or some backscatter, it gets even worse. Tip number one is don't call on frequency. The guys who are a little bit off, and for me, I tend to run the K3 in CW reverse. So I want the people that I tend to pick up are the guys on the high side. And so if somebody calls 50, 100 hertz off frequency or even more, they get right through, no problem. But if you don't, then sometimes you can just keep calling and calling. And I'm going to keep working guys that are off the sides of the pileup. And I know in DX contest, when on Sunday afternoon, when you're trying to get through pileups, calling off frequency is great. So much so that N1MM, I think, has a feature where it'll automatically shift your sending frequency off by a little bit from the spot just to help you get through. So, Chris, you got to have the same problem when you're doing 2BSIQ because you've got two pileups and you're trying to shovel them as fast as you can.
Yeah, it's the most awful thing in the world. And I'm happy to talk about it forever. But when you were talking, it reminded me when I was at TI7W for years, making 10, 11,000 Qs. there was one guy that always made it through the pileup on the first call, no matter what, and that was KR2Q, and he runs QRP. He runs 5 watts. Every single time he would call in the clear, one call off frequency, doesn't matter if there was one guy calling or 10,000, every time, single time, because he didn't zero bait everybody and he waited, just a heartbeat to throw his call in there. And if everybody did that, it would make life so much easier. Everyone calling you is excited because it's like, oh, I got to get him before the other guy. But being the first one to pounce is not always the way. Everyone's loud. You got to imagine everyone's going to be louder than you. So being loud doesn't win. In fact, when an unnamed multi would get on and just try to power over everything, all they did was slow me down because they would just QRM everybody and I couldn't copy them. So the zero beat is just like the worst thing on the planet. You said 50 or 100 hertz. You can go more than that. I mean, most guys' filters are 400 or 500 hertz. Don't be afraid to go on the edge and just throw your call in there.
Listen to what the guy ahead of you just did. So if somebody calls off frequency and they get right through, then go on the same spot or a little higher or a little lower, and you're going to get through, because I'm not going to go touch the RIT if I don't have to. A guy who was really good at this was N2NL when he was in Guam. I think I worked him on 80 one time, and he was puny weak. There were a million guys calling him, but I called up just a little bit, and Dave knows how to work people.
The same on phone. It's all about timing on phone. You really can't go off frequency that much, but the timing is just, you just got to wait. And then as soon as the pileup goes away, throw your call in there, and then almost every time.
Another thing I noticed that's kind of a rate killer is a lot of time when people call, they'll send their call twice. And as I've been running guys in the pileups and trying to deal with this, I keep trying to think, is that a good thing or a bad thing? The guys who send their call twice always seem to be the loudest ones. I don't know why that is, but the loudest guys, the guy who you get his call in the first time, then he sends his call again. So you're stuck. You're just sitting there waiting for him to finish his call a second time. You could have easily worked him and a half of another guy in the time. And the other thing I noticed in this N1W operation is a lot of times when the DXers come back to you, they sent their call twice. I've sent their call correctly, 5 and then they send their call again. And I think it's just a thing left over from big D expedition pileups where you need to kind of re-identify yourself so that they know which 5 and is coming from the guy they think they're working or not. But again, it's time. It's just amazing how hard it is to get rate in a pileup when everybody's sending their call twice. My advice would be send your call once, listen. And if you want to, and then if they don't come back to you, send your call again. It's okay, but do that listen in between because, we're typing the call in. We're ready to go almost as soon as you're done. Then we're in jail while we wait for you to send it another time. Listening for a space in a pileup is another one. A lot of times there is kind of that big blast that happens right when you say over and everybody calls and you don't really get anything because it's all kind of mushed together, or you might get a couple letters. Like sometimes I'll just send the last 2 letters or the letters that I got. And the hope is not that only one guy answers me. That'd be great. It's more like maybe only half the guys will answer me the next time. And then it's that much easier to copy somebody. But even still, it's an extra over. But for the most part, if you send your call once and then listen for a second or so and see if the guy comes back, and if he doesn't, send your call again, or listen to the pileup a little bit and see if there's a space like 1001, 1002, now send your call again. It's amazing how often the second guy just comes right through because a lot of the big stations are gone. And even really weak guys sometimes can get through by being a little off frequency and getting the timing right. The other one, again, I'm thinking about CW right now, is speed. There's a number of guys I've worked who call in regularly as part of the event, and they're sending with a hand key or a manual key, and so they have very distinct sending. And after a while, you just know. Like, okay, I hear that guy. I know who he is. They tend to be slower because they're doing manual operating. But if you've got a keyer and you can send a little faster, speed is not a bad thing. Speed gets your call out there faster. If you're in the clear, like you've called a little bit off frequency, great. We're done that much sooner. Even if you have to wait a pause and then call again, chances are still good because everybody's a little slower, that by the time you sent your call fast and paused and listened to see if I came back and then call again, you're almost right in the clear spot after everybody sent their call the first time. So a little faster is not bad. But again, you have to pay attention to the conditions. If there's flutter or a lot of static or QRN, that kind of thing, then maybe slower is a little better. And I'm not talking about sending 40 words a minute where, it's burnout speed, but just a little faster doesn't hurt. There's one guy in almost every pileup, IK2PZS, who he's not the loudest guy, but he just has got the right speed and always a little bit off frequency. And it just seems like every time he calls in, it just cuts right through. And he is not, like I said, he is not the loudest guy. The other thing is, if I get somebody's call wrong, which happens all the time, unfortunately, there's a couple of schools of thought. One, if you're sure you're loud enough and you're dealing with a guy who's proficient, then send your call once or twice to correct it and then send the exchange. And that way I'll just acknowledge the call and we all move on. But a lot of times DXers, and I can't fault them for this because because it is the way to make sure your call is correct. If I get it wrong, just send your call again and make me send it back to you correct, because now you know for sure that it's correct. Because if you send me an exchange, I'm going to have to assume that I got it right, which leads to another problem. It's amazing how many people you have their call wrong and they come back and send the exchange anyway. They don't correct you. You have to be able to recognize your own call. I don't know how else to put it, but there's a lot of guys where they'll call me. They're very loud. The pileup's over. I've reported back to them and there's nothing. And then you have to send the call and the exchange again. And then they'll come back and you're like, well, gee, you were super loud and you called me in the clear and now I've answered you. Why did, you just didn't recognize what was going on. Or I've sent your call correctly, and then you insist on going through the I must have it wrong, so please let me correct you sequence of sending their call a couple of times and then waiting. So there's lots of reasons why they didn't hear me come back. There's other QRM, or I was weak, or there was static, or whatever. I get it. It really does help if you're able to recognize your call coming back through the DIN. So Chris, most of your 2BSIQ work, you're doing things in something like the Worldwide where the exchange is kind of a known thing. So it's really a call sign copying contest. What do you look for people to do if you get their call wrong? And you're, of course, trying to manage two pileups at the same time. If you get their call wrong, what should they do?
If you get their call wrong, you send the exchange not knowing it's wrong, and then you hope that they send their call correctly. You also hear it, and then they send the exchange at the same time, so it doesn't waste time. If you do the second over and they just send their call, it turns into this disaster that unraveling is hard, but that's the challenge of 2BSIQ, right? That's what separates the guys with the high error rates and the not. I guess in that case, they should send their call and make sure I have it right, because I do appreciate that. But I might scream at the radio a little bit when they do that, especially if they send their call more than once.
How do you know you have a call wrong?
You don't. I mean, there's times when you, like if someone clobbers them, they'll call over the top and you're like, yeah, I don't know. But when you're doing 2BSIQ at 48 words a minute, that's about half a second worth of thought where you're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that call's wrong, but I'm paying attention over here. This guy's over here. Am I pointed the right direction? Is my logging program right? Is my amp keying correctly? Am I on the right band right now? So for that fleeting second, it's like, oh God, I hope I got that guy's call right. And then he corrects it. You're like, okay, I didn't. That's a whole different topic, man.
Well, I'm not at that level to handle two pileups at the same time, but it's interesting to me how often there's just something where you have it wrong. I don't know what it is, but it's I guess the word for it would be call sign vocabulary. You know a lot of calls. You know what calls are supposed to look like or feel like. You know there's certain letters that don't usually show up after the number in certain countries, whatever. And you're just like, okay, I know I've got something wrong. And then the other thing that really tips me off is if they're not in super check partial, but there's something that's close. And oftentimes it'll be one dit or a dash or something off. And you're looking at going, yeah, I probably heard the other thing. This is all part of the game, right? To get to the point where as you're logging a guy or as you're typing him in, you're looking at the check partial window and you're figuring out, okay, did I get this right or not? Nothing's better than having the call pop up, because then you like, oh, I probably have it right. Or it pops up and it doesn't match, but there's 3 calls that are off by 1, and you realize, oh, okay, yeah, he probably did send Japan Hotel 1 instead of Japan Sierra 1, that kind of thing. And you can almost correct it on the fly. I guess I'm just advocating for super check partial. It's worth getting used to having it up there. And it doesn't need to be a giant window with 4x10 matrix of calls. Chances are pretty good as you get close to having the correct call, there are not going to be that many things on the screen. One of the reasons that Ken K1EA, when he made CT way back in the beginning, he showed call signs that you had already worked in the contest in a different color or different, they were bolded. And the idea was your chances of, if you've worked somebody before on another band, there's a much higher probability that that's the guy who's calling you, or that's the correct call the second time. And every time you think that you've got it all figured out, 2 guys like IU0 SRU and IU0 SRH start calling in at different times. So, there's always calls that are close to each other, and you just have to really watch out. And I had one like 9A1AR. I worked him a bunch of times in it, but 9A1AA called in one time, and I went back to 9A1AR, and you could tell he was a little exasperated because probably everybody thinks it's the AR's call, not AA's. And by the way, everybody's crazy to have short call signs or wanting short calls because, yes, they're faster to say, but it's actually easier to figure out a call sign the more letters there are to work with. So especially when I'm doing log checking, JA calls are easier to figure out who they probably work than a 1-by-1 call, because who the heck? any one letter's off and you've lost almost all ability to match it up with something.
So I should be hanging on to W1DED.
Yeah, well, it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's got a dot in it, so that's the other thing. If your call sign, dots are, when I'm doing log checking in CW, dots are bad. Seems like anything with dots in it, and if there's more than one dot in a row, then it's even worse. So that's why the Sugar 5 calls all become Sugar Hotels, and the KH6s become K5B, whatever. There's a bunch of ones like that. So it pays to really kind of look at your log checking reports and know what kind of mistakes you typically make. There's a very different style when you're working people who are not typically contesters. They just tend to send stuff more often. They almost always have to send 73 TU, where in a contest you would just send the exchange and be done. So oftentimes I'm ready. I've got my finger on the, the button to send a TU message, and suddenly the guy starts sending more stuff. So it always seems to catch me by surprise. But from a contest perspective, you want to send your call once, pause, see if they came back to you, then send it again. You want to call off frequency. You want to be as brief as possible. If your call is correct, do not send your call again, because sending your call again is a little bit of a signal to say, hey, you may have something wrong. You should pay attention. So it's just a couple of simple things like that will help you get through pileups a lot faster and make you a lot more efficient. And this is true whether you're search and passing by yourself or if you're calling in packet pileups. The packet pileups are even worse because there's more guys calling at the same time. So the more you can do to get off to the side and get in the clear and send at the right speed will help you get in and out much, much faster.
I think Randy might need a hug after his 6,000 QSOs with all these criticisms.
With all these complaints.
Man, these guys were doing you a favor, man. Tell them they're doing everything wrong.
No, it's all part of the game. We've talked about that before, that, a big part of running a pileup, Marty Lane was very, he liked to say it was a performance, where the guy on the DX end was kind of the conductor of the orchestra, and how he handled things and how his style and nature of working people, humans tend to mirror what they're hearing. And so if you're doing things in a good way and a snappy way and so on, people will tend to do the same thing in reverse. The last thing, okay, I've got one more. There's always one more, right? I don't know what it is. Why, when I come back to somebody, do you have to keep calling me? And I think some of this goes back to you have to recognize your own call. If I came back to some other call, that's not your call. But sometimes it's crazy. You've got a guy picked out. You're trying to work him. You've got 4 of the 6 letters in his call. And every time he sends his call, some other guy sends his. And sometimes the letters are mostly the same. So you're like, okay, I can kind of get it. And sometimes they have nothing to do with each other. And it's just all you can do not to pull your hair out. We've done a lot of stuff where we're listing up one just to kind of spread people out a little bit and make it so that you can control them better. Even though the DXer thing says, okay, I'm going to call and call and call, and they're eventually I'm going to bludgeon them into working me. It's actually faster if you just be quiet. Let him work the guy he's working and then try again. Because yes, you can get in there and sometimes you're going to win where you stomp on the other guy. The DX operator just says, okay, screw it. I'm going to work you because I got your call and my goal is to go as fast as possible. But in the end, all of that overcalling just slows everything down. So I realize I'm preaching to no one. No one's going to listen to me on this, but it will all be faster if everybody just listened for their call and then spent when it was their turn.
That's been a problem since the beginning of ham radio. So I'm sure.
It's like we go back to kindergarten and now you get in line,
Like you want to talk about, traffic in downtown Rome at the same time? That's fine.
I'm sure you solved it once for all tonight. Good job, Randy.
Now all I'm doing is complaining and begging for something, but I know it is the way it is. And It's very cultural. You can see it from different places. That's one of the things that makes working JAs so nice, because they're very polite and tend to wait. And USAs are somewhere in between. A little bit of aggression, but also some patience.
So, Randy, is there anything from an equipment standpoint that comes to mind that people should be thinking about before they jump into that pileup that you would notice?
Well, one of the big things I'm always going on about, especially on phone, is audio. Again, in these DX or pileup, you've got a bunch of people calling. Good audio is fantastic. It just seems to cut through. It's very clear. It helps if, obviously some of it is based on the person's tone in their voice and how well they can enunciate things. And I realize everybody has a lot of different accents and so on. That's fine. But good audio on phone is worth everything. And if that means sitting down with somebody else who records you and plays it back, or just helps you figure out how to set up the equalizer or whatever, you can make punchy audio that cuts through. That's not, the goal is it's not fuzzy, it's not splattering or anything. It's just crisp and clean. There's no blower noise in the background, that kind of thing. So that's from my equipment standpoint. I think good audio on phone can make a huge difference. On CW, everybody kind of sounds the same. We don't have any more of the Russian guys with the wobbly transmitters, although they were always pretty cool to work.
The crisp audio is very user specific too. One guy will say their audio sounds great, and then the other guy will say it sounds terrible. I guess the best audio is the one that gets you through the pileup the quickest. I mean, really. So, but it's so important.
It's interesting too. I don't know if it's my voice or whatever, but when people call me in a phone pileup, they're almost always what I would think is off frequency. So I'm always writing the RIT down a little bit when I'm running a phone pileup. And I don't know if it's because my voice is a little bit on the high side, so people tend to tune it off a little bit. But there's been a funny thing going on here lately where a lot of people seem to feel like you can only transmit on the decimals. Not really sure where this came from. We have dials that allow us to go to almost any frequency we want, but occasionally people will call me and go, "What frequency are you on?" And I'll give them a number, and they'll like, "Oh, well, you're not on 0.1 or 0.4 or what." It's like, well, yeah, so.
What's funny is we try to get them to change their behavior for that. And during the 10-meter contest, I purposely stat to, 583, 584, 585, because if I didn't, guys would call me off frequency and it was super annoying. So instead of getting them to change their habits, they changed mine because I didn't want to deal with it.
I have to confess, I did the same thing. And when I'm running guys as N1W, I almost always try to get right on a decimal. There's almost nothing worse than being at, let's say, like 14005.7 or 0.6. Because some people will spot you at the nearest kilohertz above you. Some people will spot you at the one below you. Some of the RBNs will wobble a little bit. So you can almost tell when you've been spotted, and the pileup kind of moves from one place to another as people are clicking on things, which is good because it does randomize things a little bit. But if you get right on kilohertz or like a 0.5 or something like that, it seems to cut down on some of the wobble.
And if you try to move somebody to your other frequency and you're not right on a digit, chances are lower they'll find you because they didn't tune off just a little bit and they don't understand what 14005.5 sounds like.
Yeah, it's funny when you move people. Sometimes you move them to a spot where there's already a guy, and so you figure, well, I'll go up to and they'll find me, and it just less and less people seem to be able to do that.
Yeah, I moved a guy in the 10-meter contest to like 28.911, thinking there is no way in heck anybody is at 28.911. And I hit the button, and there's a guy on there like 30/9 running guys. Like, you got to be kidding me! Right on frequency. Oh, sorry, man, didn't work the guy, but yeah, moving is a whole other art.
It's funny, all these little things that we kind of take for granted. And if you think back, where do we learn all this stuff? I don't know. I learned it in high school with a crap radio and a worse antenna, calling expeditions, and you just kind of learn, hey, I need to do this kind of thing to get through it. In many ways, there's almost nothing better for learning contesting than to be low power, because you're forced to really figure it out instead of just being the loudest guy and you call and they come back to you.
It's good motivation to have bigger antennas too, because everybody hates being low power, and it's just super frustrating. But I think you learn it by being active, and then I'll say it again, going to multi-ops. That's the way. That's 100%. If you can't do that, getting on and being active and just learning what doesn't work to try something else for sure.
My name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. This has been the Contest Crew. Thank you for joining us.
All right, I feel better now.
Yeah, man, it's like a therapy session.